So as I say the name Nehemiah, I already have to pause. Have any of you watched the Bible Project's video on Ezra and Nehemiah? So the guy pronounces it Nehemiah, which I'm guessing is actually more accurate. And so every time I say or hear Nehemiah, I'm saying that wrong. Do I conform and try to be like the cool guy now that I know how it's said, or do I just stick with it? So I might try to pretend to be cool in front of you and say Nehemiah. You can judge me if you want. Yeah.
Do you know that we found the book for those cartoons?
Oh, like the drawings?
It's a huge book.
Oh.
And it's got every one of them in it.
That's so cool. Like, you found it online?
No, we found it at the Museum of Bible.
Oh, really? That's so cool. I was there a couple years ago. I would have no idea about this Bible project. But yeah, the little drawings that they have throughout those videos, which as a visual learner, that is something. Yeah. Yeah. I want to meet the person who is drawing those. That is phenomenal. But yeah, that's so cool that I've heard that you can buy them, but I've never actually heard anybody that has come across them. So that's really cool to. It's a couple more pictures. Yeah. So something that I didn't know about Nehemiah was that in the Bible Project they said that originally Ezra and Nehemiah, I'll go back and forth, was one scroll. So it's like one story. So where Ezra ends, Nehemiah picks up, and if you've read through them, it makes sense because you get to the end of, or they're in each other's stories. You know, we'll find that out, especially with Nehemiah. You get towards the end, it's like, hey, Ezra, we've learned about you already, and so that shows kind of the historical context. These people working with each other, and we've got some other prophets mentioned too. Have you noticed that? I forget, we're like a day behind in the reading. Where are all you good folk who are keeping up with the reading? Where are you right now? Okay, so you read the first. Missouri Synod pronunciation. That's good. Yeah, so I think it's Nehemiah that will find Malachi, and there are a couple of other contemporary prophets. So just to kind of, as you go through, how you see these historical figures put in the context of other people. Any idea when this book takes place? Speaking of historical context. Manasseh. King Artaxerxes. I appreciate the guess. Yeah, so this is roughly 60 years after the Babylonian exile. And so they're now under Persian rule. So, Babylon was, Israel was in exile under Babylon. And then Persia came and overthrew Babylon, or Babylonia. I've heard it pronounced both ways. Nehemiah, Nehemiah, same thing. And now, as we saw, and Pastor Bugler talked about in his message, and as if you've been following along, you see God is working through these foreign kings. And so Artaxerxes, the Persian king, is in charge, and he is allowing these exiles to go home, to go and rebuild. And that is at a glance, context for where we are in both Ezra and Nehemiah, but specifically for today, Nehemiah. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but people say Psalms is like the prayer book of the Bible. Have you heard that? You know, you can go and open up to a psalm and pray it. Well, I think that Nehemiah is second place. Not necessarily in like, you know, Psalms, you can just open it up and pray. But Nehemiah prays so much. And so what we're going to be doing this morning is we're going to kind of be going over the whole book of Nehemiah, hitting some of the bigger, more important happenings. And one thing I want you to pay attention to is that prayer. Like, he prays so much. So let's, again, if you want to follow along in Bibles in the pews, Nehemiah starts on page 398. And so in the beginning of the book, he talks about how he had somebody come from Jerusalem and say that the walls around Jerusalem are down. And the city is like being burned. And this really bothers Nehemiah because this is the holy city. This is Jerusalem. And so I want to turn our attention now specifically to Nehemiah's prayer in chapter 1, verses 5 through 10. I'm going to read it out loud, but I would encourage you to follow along. This prayer is an incredible prayer. Nehemiah says, O God, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you remain to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place I have chosen them to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant mercy in the sight of this man. And then, now I was a cupbearer of the king. So, obviously not part of the prayer there, but what a prayer. You know, I thought about like, if we were to kind of make this as like I, a poor, miserable sinner, have sinned against you in thought, word, and deed. I mean, this kind of fits that form, you know, going before Almighty God and, you know, getting specific down into the sins, but yet pointing back to God's mercy and God's faithfulness to his covenant. You know, so it really is great because he is humbling himself before God Almighty, repenting and confessing of the sins, not just of himself, but of the whole people of Israel. And it's like, a God, if for nothing else, be faithful to your own word. You know, that's an incredible prayer. It's a kind of a confession and a prayer. What do you guys think would happen if we prayed more like that? More kind of the form of what Nehemiah, it's been a while, prayed here.
There's a lot of times that I think, I haven't been raised in the church, okay? We say our prayers every Sunday, and yet until you take the fact that you are a child of God in, you don't believe your prayers are answered.
Mm.
You know, I don't think we as Lutherans promote prayer the way a lot of other churches do. I mean, we promote our liturgy, which has prayer in it, but it's not something that I was ever raised knowing about.
Mm. Yeah, having the prayer be an earnest from your heart kind of prayer, like really making it your own. There's kind of a disconnect. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Morris?
I also found out that once I started writing down my prayers and going back to see how they were answered, it made it a lot more personal.
Mm.
I think when we don't see the answer all the time, we don't always understand that God has answered that prayer.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've not been as faithful as I've wanted to be, but I've gone through times where I've got a prayer journal that's small enough to fit in my pocket, and somebody says something, oh, let me pray for you for that, and then to come back and to see, because I think one of the things that we see throughout all of Israel's history, but a lot here in Ezra and Nehemiah, is they're looking back on the acts of God, and they're remembering his faithfulness, and so they're being restored and renewed by remembering what he did in the past. Well, that shouldn't be any different for us. We obviously look to the Bible and see, okay, these are some of the things that God has done in the past, but even for our own people, in the Old Testament, these were the Israelites. And so the Israelites looked back on their own history and saw, okay, this is how God delivered our flesh and blood ancestors. It's a little bit different for us, but we have people that we know that are our flesh and blood that God has answered our prayers for. And to go back and reflect on that, it reminds us of God's goodness. Yeah.
Christ has come to pray to pay for all of our sins. And so we've been going to Christ rather than thinking back to our history.
Yeah, we look at everything through that Christ-centered lens, and that kind of gives us the new projection of how we see things. Absolutely. I think this prayer that Nehemiah has is just it's a great liturgical prayer, because it addresses God Almighty. It addresses how much we have sinned, and it looks back to God's goodness in hope for the future. And I think that's kind of the life of a Christian in some regards, is remembering who's in charge, remembering that I've messed up and need forgiveness, and then remembering the goodness, the mercy, and the grace of God to keep me going forward. And so I just, he starts it off with a bang, with a really great prayer to kind of set the tone for this monumental event in Israel's history. They've been without their temple for a long time. And so this is a big deal. They're coming back to the promised land, back to the land that God promised to their forefathers, and they're going to get to rebuild the temple. And so this is hugely important for people of Israel. Now, some of them, it was important because, oh yeah, this is great, and then they don't end up worshiping God anyways. But by and large, it is really important for the Israelites. So let's look at chapter 2, the first 4 verses. So, Nehemiah has prayed this prayer, and then in chapter 2, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, second time today, Pastor Bugler talked about that, being filled with the spirits of wine, always makes somebody better to listen. I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart." Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad? When the city of my father's, when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire." Then the king said to me, "What are you requesting?" So it's kind of interesting here. He tries to hide the fact, like he doesn't want it's one of those where like he wants the king to ask, but he doesn't want the king to ask what's bothering him. Like I want you to want to ask, that kind of thing. But the king realizes something's up. And, if you were in this situation and the king asks, he's in good spirits, by the way, like he's a little tipsy, a little more susceptible to persuasion or to requests. King asks, what would you do? King asks, what do you want done? Would you just ask? Would you just ask what you want? There's a purpose for this, so I'm not just... If the king asks, what do you want done? Would you just ask what it is that you want?
I think it would depend on the relationship we have with the king. Now, he's the king's cupbearer, so there's got to be closeness there.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be easier for him to maybe hope that the king would ask, what is it you want? Where somebody just walking in and palace doors and saying, sir, would you answer my question for me?
Yeah. So he's got this relationship. He's the cupbearer, which is, he's probably been in demand recently in this situation. So he's probably got that close relationship. I think what I was thinking is, the king asked me what I want. I would, jump through the hoops along with the king, all this stuff. But I would ask, but what does Nehemiah do? Second half of verse 4. So the king says, what are you requesting? He prayed. The king asks what he wants, and Nehemiah's first thought is to pray. Isn't that incredible? You have the king of Persia, one of the biggest forces around, who is drunk, whom you have a close relationship with, and he's asking, hey, what do you want? He doesn't just say, well, I'd love to go back to my land. No, he prays. And I just, that's just incredible, that relationship that Nehemiah has to God, for that to be his first instinct. And even when you factor in, he was probably nervous too, to bring such a request before the king. Drunk or not, that's, to ask the king to do something of this magnitude, people have been killed for less. And even with those nerves, his first thought is he prayed to God. That's incredible, that first step. And then, right after that, he says, if it pleases the king, jumping through those hoops again, doing all the appropriate etiquette before the king, if it pleases the king, let me go and rebuild it. And so King Artaxerxes allows him to go. And not only that, but he sends him the stuff too, right? He asks him how long, but then he sends him with timber for the temple, and he sends him with his own army officers, and he sends him with a cavalry. Works out pretty well for Nehemiah, right? He was just hoping for, hey, I just want some time off. I just want a little bit of time off. And he's like, yeah, have some time off. You can take my Rolls Royce. You can drive there in that. There's some spending money in the trunk. His cup overflows. And, this is speculation. I don't know if that would have been the case if Nehemiah had prayed to God before or not. But the fact is that he did pray to God, and he allowed God to work through him. Okay, God, what do you want me to say here? And obviously, God worked on the heart of the king and through the words of Nehemiah to accomplish this. And it's pretty important, because to rebuild the temple, you need materials, right? I mean, you can obviously you can go to church. The church is not based on a building, we could go have church out in the back, but in those days, the temple was the temple. Like you needed to have stuff. And so, the cedars from Lebanon, cedars were like really, really big trees. So like this, he's setting Nehemiah and those who are going back with Nehemiah in a very good position to do a good job and to rebuild this temple. Before I move on, anybody have anything? Yeah.
I've read through this before. The king sort of says, go and build the temple to God, to be Almighty God. We don't have that thought with me. He's sort of a believer in the Almighty God.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed too. I forgot to mention, so thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, the king, whether or not he has faith, we don't know, but he fears the Lord. He acknowledges him to be the Lord Almighty. And if you remember going back through the Old Testament, one of the things that God talked about is to make my name known among the nations. Well, I'd say that's happening here. The name of the Lord is known by the king of Persia and is feared. So, yeah, absolutely. There's at least, whether or not it's a profession of faith, he at least acknowledges he's powerful, which, that's pretty important. Excuse me. All right, let's go to chapter 2, verse 19. So this is after Nehemiah goes and inspects the wall. So Nehemiah 2:19. But when Sanballat and Horonite and Tobiah the Amorite served, and I'm sure the guy from the video would have all these right pronunciations. You're getting what you're getting with me. When these people heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, "What is this thing you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" Uh-oh. So here, people are mocking him, and they're accusing them of rebelling against the king. Now that's pretty serious. Again, people have been killed for far less, right? Than being accused of rebelling against the king. But what does he do? He replies to them, "The God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will arise and build, and you have no portion or claim in Jerusalem." So, you can take this in a different way, but I take the "we, his servants," that could mean God or king. It doesn't say who that's talking about that they're servants of. And I think, if you take it that way, that's a great example of how you serve God and your authorities, right? You've got the proper hierarchy of God above all else, but then you serve the leaders whom God has put above you, right? Even if you don't agree with the direction that the leadership is going, unless it goes against God's word, you obey them. And so you may take this differently, but I take it as, we, his servants, as in at least the potential to be King Artaxerxes. So, but yeah, they know that they've been blessed by God, and they're not going to let these jeerers, these mockers, or these people stop them from doing what they have been commanded by God to do. Let's jump ahead to chapter 4. Like I said, we're just going to kind of be jumping around, hitting some key points. Hopefully you don't get too sad that we skipped your favorite part of Nehemiah. So chapter 4, 1 through 3. There's Sanballat again. Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged and jeered at the Jews And he said in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heap of rubbish and burned ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break it down, he will break down their stone wall. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own heads and give them up to plunder in a land where they are captives. Oh, that was verse 4. Just said go through verse 3. Wow. Forget that last little part, unless you don't want to. So they're getting resistance again. You know, what is he saying about the fox part? Whoever it was that said it, I don't think that was... What's that? Yeah. A fox could stand on it and knock it over. This is such a shoddy job that, it'll just fall over with any bit of weight. Now, how do you respond when somebody mocks? I don't know how often this happens, because I know it's like in school, that's when you get mocked the most. I think we can probably all agree with that. But what happens when there's something that you're passionate about and somebody mocks you or taunts you about it?
Well, I think when you were younger, I think when that happened, you would either buckle down and do better or just give up. And now I think, you know what, I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. That's probably a mature answer.
Well, you have to find out what you are good at, and you're not good at everything. No one is. And so, all right, I'm not as good as you are at playing baseball. I could swing a bat if I had to.
I bet she could throw an elbow, though.
My ability to read is very good, and the other thing I do is write my craft work, and so those things I'm good at. That's why I take pride. I can't do anything else. And so it is what it is.
So the high road of realizing, I'm not talented at everything, but I do have these gifts and abilities. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, it's something that you're passionate about and you're working hard at, and then somebody's going to say, looks like a 10-pound animal could knock it over. Well, what gives? I've been working hard on this. Yeah.
Whatever you do, don't ever say your mother's was better than your wife's, because she'll never do it again.
Yep.
It's not there.
I saw another hand back there.
Enemies of the Israelites, Philistines, Ammonites, and all the surrounding nations, their lifestyle against Israel, their enemies, jealous.
Yeah, so these are enemies, people who, had it out for the Israelites for a long time, yeah.
Even if there's something that I'm not very good at, I go ahead and do it. Somebody points out the actions. A couple of different actions. One is to point out that I've done twice as much as they've done, even if I've done it 4 days. Second thing is
About 2 weeks ago,
Yeah. If it comes back to you, yeah. I'll take the spotlight off you, but it comes back, let me know. Yeah, I think, I most resonate with, somebody wants to criticize something that I'm passionate about, that I'm working on, I'm gonna lash out.
I challenge them to go ahead and take my place and do it better.
Yeah. You want to do it? Go ahead. Now we can argue about if Nehemiah's prayer is good, but Nehemiah again prays. Verse 4, then it says, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own head and give them to be plundered in a land where they are captives." So, now this is a little bit of a, excuse me, this is a little bit of the Old Testament times versus now, right? You know, David throughout the Psalms, "Hear me, O God, for my enemies are around me." Well, we don't have enemies around us, you know. Things are different. But being delivered from their very physical enemies was a very real part of their lives. And so, just, it's a little bit different is what I'm saying. But the fact that he puts it in God's hands, the fact that he doesn't react out of anger or frustration, but the fact that he prays, he is upset and, you know, probably has a lot of emotions for these guys who are coming in and criticizing his passion and his work, and he prays. It's something that I think another example of where we can take a page out of Nehemiah's book. All right, so moving ahead to verse 8. Verse 8 says, and they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause some confusion in it. So now, the enemies are stepping up their game, right? You know, the little playground taunts, they're not getting the job done anymore. They thought they'd scare them off by, you know, "Oh yeah, your building's so bad that a fox could wag its tail at it and fall over." And they thought that Nehemiah and the bunch would give up. When that doesn't work, then they resort to more drastic means. They start plotting and trying to stir up war. How would you respond if you were in that situation? A lot of these things, you know, I think reading it, you might not get the emotional gravitas. But if you're in it, you know, just try putting yourself in the shoes of somebody who's working hard at rebuilding God's temple, and all these people keep trying to make fun of you, to make you want to turn back, and then to start, you're gonna try to start a war by, you know, you're gonna plot together against us. A lot of emotions. So, how might you respond if you were Nehemiah? This is the part where I'm asking you to confess or to bring about your more sinful side. It's okay. I'm bringing out the points here. You just have to play along. Yeah.
Well, let's go to driving down 40 or 90. During rush hour traffic. All right, look at the people as they drive in and out. What are you going to do? You know, and I drove from North Homestead to Willoughby every day for 5 years. And it was during rush hour traffic. And I finally got to the point where I said, "Lord, if there's an accident and I have to stop and I'm backed up, then thank you for protecting me." And you know, you just kind of have to say to God, "There's nothing I can do about this," and not be angry.
Mm-hmm.
But how many of us today can kind of live that time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you react out of emotion. A lot of the times most of the time we don't have that sense of mind to take a step back and say, "Ooh, I might be getting home a half hour later, but I'm getting home tonight." Yeah. Yeah, so that is good. What I was going for is, I'd be angry, and then I was wanting you to think, "Oh, but Nehemiah prayed." But Nehemiah actually did something else this time, more than just pray. Verse 9, and we prayed to our God, okay, that checks out with Nehemiah, and we set a guard as protection against them day and night. See that balance here of prayer and action? What do you think the balance should be in our lives of praying about something and acting, doing something? 50-50? Or 100-100? Well, which one is it? Yeah. How often do we think, and this is not to diminish prayer, but how often do we say, I'll pray about it, and that'll be good? I mean, is it good to pray about things? Yes. But how often do we just leave it at prayer and not act on it? You know, Nehemiah could have just been like, you know what? God will protect us. I mean, in a sense, he wasn't wrong, but he trusted in God, but he's also thinking, okay, God's going to protect us, but we'll take the necessary steps to make sure that they don't cause an issue to you. So they set up a guard. You know, it's like, I trust that God is going to protect me at night, but I'm still going to lock my door. You know, and so I think this is highlighting just this really important balance of having faith and praying to God and trusting in him, but also doing something. There is most people would say it's a cheesy Christian movie called Facing the Giants. Has anybody heard it or seen it? It's been a while, so it's been probably like 7 or 8 years, so I won't say if I think it's cheesy or not, because I don't remember well. But there's a part where this guy talks about a farmer praying for rain, and how the farmer also went out and started getting, started putting down, I'm really going to show my hand, not knowing anything about farming life, agriculture, but he started to prepare the fields as though it would rain, right? He didn't just say, God, let it rain, but he said, God, please send rain, and I'm going to prepare as though you are going to send rain. So it's that relationship of, I trust God, I trust that he's going to, in Nehemiah's case, protect me, but he has also given me the ability to set people up as guard and, do something about it as well. So, do you think we ever get out of balance with that? With the relationship of prayer and of doing something? Does that get out of balance, do you think? Which side?
Sometimes we reverse it. Like we take an action, and then we pray for Thanksgiving. Like if somebody cuts you off on the road, you give the praise, and then it's not out and you get into an accident.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Somebody cuts you off and you slam on the brakes. Thank God that you're okay. Absolutely. I think we can get in the habit sometimes too of just doing actions too, and not relying on God. And then it's about relying on our own strength. And then, it's like using the illustration of locking your doors at night. I think, as a simple example, saying, okay, I trust God, I trust he's going to protect me, but I'm going to lock my doors. Going too far on the action side is, I'm going to lock my doors, I'm going to get a deadbolt, I'm going to get a camera out front, I'm going to have a gun in every room of the house. Sure, you're doing a lot, but you're not trusting in God, when you're so paranoid that you're doing absolutely every single thing that you can. All that being said, there are situations where you need to take that precaution. I'm not trying to condemn that, but just as a general fact, I'm guessing maybe 90% of us in this room aren't going to need to go and do all that stuff. Deadbolting, security cameras, tripwires. We're not going to need to do that. A sufficient locking the door and trusting in God will suffice. Yeah.
God is telling you, I gave you a brain, use it.
Exactly. God has given us a brain. It's Luther's talking about the first article of the creed. I believe that God has given me my eyes, my ears, my body, all my members. He's given me what I need to support this body. He's given me a brain to make decisions, and so we need to rely on God, but we also realize that God has given us what we need to live day to day. The capacity to make decisions that are going to preserve our life, that kind of thing. And so it is a balance. It's a balance of trusting in God, but also doing something with what God has given you. Yeah. I think that's the first part.
Claim more minds.
Claim more minds.
Eliminates about 40% of one and done.
Yeah, simple. So you're the guy if we need that. Yeah, so this part of Nehemiah, people crowds are getting rowdy. Praise to God, but he also sets up a defense. All right, jumping ahead to chapter 4, verses 16 and 17. So the heading is, the work resumes. From that day on, half of my servants worked on construction, and half had spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. And the leaders stood behind the whole house of Judah, who were building the wall. Those who carried burdens were loaded in such a way that each labored on the work with one hand and held the weapon with the other. So this further kind of, I kind of actually like this verse a lot, because I'm guilty of this. I think you would probably say, you younger generations definitely are, but of things stopping you and just being like, well, I guess we're not getting that job done. There are people coming for our lives. I guess we're not going to get the temple built. What do? They get a system. They get a system that allows them to have the necessary defenses, but also keep working. And I think, that just highlights too, just the trust and the understanding of the purpose that's in front of them. This is rebuilding God's temple. Like, okay, we'll have to work at a slower pace. We'll have to, our bodies will have to take a beating for a while because we're going to be working harder, but we're going to find a way. I think, that kind of goes with that last section where they prayed, but they did something. They found a way to keep going, and they trusted that God was going to provide for them. All right, anything else from this chapter before we move on to chapter 5? All right, chapter 5, Nehemiah helps the poor. Now, I mentioned this in my sermon 2 weeks ago, I think, in Ezekiel, but have you guys noticed, reading through the Bible, the theme of God caring for the widow, the orphan, the poor, like how that kind of theme keeps coming up? Well, it keeps coming up again. But this time, what does the heading section of your Bible say? Hey, Nehemiah stops the oppression of the poor. This is one of the first times that I remember in reading through the Old Testament so far where this kind of thing actually happens, right? Most of the time, it's the poor and the oppressed are being oppressed. But Nehemiah does something. Isn't Nehemiah doing something bigger during this? Isn't he, I don't know, working on rebuilding the wall around the city of Jerusalem? But he takes time to care, and he stops the oppression of the poor. Pretty profound, huh? The fact that Nehemiah and his people have such an important task, and they were given a timeline. King Artaxerxes in Persia said, how long do you need? Nehemiah, how long you need? And they work out a time frame. You know, all these things that, all this outside trouble that these people are causing, that's going to slow down their production. That's going to slow down the timeline. But yet, Nehemiah sees it as important enough to stop and to care for these people. Is that something we should take note of? Even in the midst of our busy lives, when there are people who are in need, like, there are some days where it's like, I'm running late. I couldn't stop if I needed to. What if I needed to? Would I? Like that kind of thing. I hope I would. I pray that I would not be so have a hard heart that I would be like, I gotta get out to my meeting on time. Hopefully I would stop. But just like when we get into the things, especially something important, being willing to step back and to take care of those who God has called us to take care of. And so Nehemiah gets a gold star on this one. I mean, bravo. He finally listened to what God has been saying for, I don't know, how long has it been since Exodus? A couple thousand years. Somebody finally listens. I just imagine God smiling, like, thank you. Thank you for listening. Verse 16 in chapter 5 said, so this is under the heading Nehemiah's generosity. I also persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for the work. And so this is an example where his faith in God, it dictates the quality of his work. Like he's working for the Lord. He's not working to get something out of it, which is kind of hard to separate from, right? Like, I'm working for the Lord as a pastor, but I also need the money to provide for my family, right? But I think how we act and how Nehemiah here acts, it dictates how he works, how he treats others as well. And then the next verse, there were more than 150 men at my table who came to us from the nations, and it was on his expense. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. 150 men, and Nehemiah covers the bill. That's incredible. And that comes from that heart of faith that he has been praying to God with, that he has been going and seeking God for his direction for this whole time. Let's go to chapter 6 now. In 6, 1 through 9, there is a conspiracy. We won't read all of it for time's sake. But there is now a conspiracy, another conspiracy, I guess, against Nehemiah and the people. And then at verse 9, what happens? Without looking, anybody want to guess? Hey, he prays again. This is turning into like the Sunday school answer. Jesus! Like, chances are you say that, you're right. So in the midst of the conspiracy, Nehemiah says, their hands will drop from their work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. So it's like he's acknowledging others, but strengthen me, God. Don't let me get focused on what's going on around and outside of myself and what's in my control. But strengthen me, strengthen my hands to do this work that you've given to me to do. Then we get to verse 15. The wall is finished. I'm going to read 15 through 17 here. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul, in 52 days. Pretty quick, right? 52 days. That's pretty good. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid, and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. I don't know why I had verse 17. That has nothing to do with whatever I was going with it. But that's incredible, isn't it? Like, they felt, how does it say it? They fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that the work had been accomplished with the help of our God. That's just something, you know. I know we shouldn't want like people to be, you don't want to rub people's noses in it, you know. But when something like this happens, where it's like they see God at work and they're like, oh man, like you can't help but smile. I don't know if that's sinful or not. If it is, you know, repent. But just when the work of God is so at hand, people are like, they just feel less than. You know, and that's not to be like, well, it is to be like, you poor miserable sinner, you are less than. Turn to him. But just people realizing that they can't stack up against God. And just, that had to have been like, you know, like in a sporting event where there's like a big play and the home, like the away team does something big, and you just hear all the home fans go, I just wonder if there was like a collective sigh. Like, God just did all this. We've lost. You know? Had to have been a great feeling. Again, I don't know if it's sinful or not to revel in that, like, yeah, you lost to God, but it's pretty good. So jumping ahead again to 7, so there's a list of exiles who are going to return, but just this verse 5 here. Then my God put it into my heart to assemble the nobles and officials and the people to be enrolled by genealogy. And I found the book of genealogy of those who came at the first, and I found written in it, and then it goes on. Now, this would be a big undertaking to kind of keep track of all these people, but have you ever felt like God has ever put something big on your heart? Like, you know, you don't necessarily know why you're wanting to do something, but you're like, I feel like God wants me to do this. Have you ever felt that? Maybe you're just too good to, not too good, that's not what I'm trying to say. You're just, you don't want to brag. Maybe you're like, yeah, God put this on my heart and it was pretty special. You can brag on what God put on your heart if that's the case. You're starting to say something? Has God ever put anything on your heart? Oh boy, this isn't good, guys. This is not good at all.
Let's just say yes, there are times that we don't always remember it.
That's fair. Yeah, there are times where we don't always remember it. You know, I think this is just, you know, this is a big thing. Like I said, the census, getting all the list of people, that's a big job.
Yeah, but you have to remember why he was also doing it. If they were going to start working in the temple again, they had to know who the Levites were. Because only the Levites could do the sacrifices that were going to be demanded.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this wasn't just some, you know, rhyme or reason. I mean, there was a definite purpose.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they had to find the people who were able to go before God according to the laws that God had given. Absolutely. You know, thinking back to that, kind of shifting here, do you guys remember speaking of census, roughly how many people were there at the peak of Israel? Like, probably wandering in the wilderness was probably when there were the most. Do you guys have any recollection of how many there were?
Couple million? They said 3 million people approximately, but that's only men. So if you count women and children, they're thinking probably close to 6 million people.
I've heard some estimates of even like 15. Now, look at how many are left. Let's see. Where is it? Verse 66. 42,000. Even if, factor in the women and children. Yeah. Boy. Remember we've been talking about this word remnant a lot? There's a remnant. Going from, just counting the men, 3 million down to 42.
Is this the first returning of the exiles?
This would be,
Because it says a list of returned exiles, but there were 3 returning of the exiles.
there were what?
3 returns the exiles returned.
Yeah,
So if this is only the first one, that may not be all.
yeah, that's fair. Even so, though, that number in contrast,
Well, yes.
but just that difference of, let's even say they got up to 1 million, which going from 42,000 in that first number that'd be a big jump. Let's say even 700,000 from what they used to be. That is pennies on the dollar. But yeah, God is faithful. God works through this remnant, and God will continue to work as we see, spoiler alert, if you have not gone to worship yet, but are going to at 11 o'clock, the extinction of the Jews was threatened again. God works there again. And, this is the kind of thing that, when we think about, we were talking about looking back on what God has done, these may not be our flesh and blood relatives, but, we are grafted into the same promise that these people were. These are our spiritual relatives, and, remember the faithfulness of God even through such a small number. If you were to, think about maybe you've been a part of a church that's closed. Like, you remember the glory days of like 300-400 people in the sanctuary, and then now there's like 20 people worshiping. Something like that. Guess what? God's word is still being preached to those 20 people. God still works through the remnant. God still works through his word. Now, thankfully, St. Paul is not in that situation of having, I know the glory days were still probably ways off from what the glory days were of packed house. God works through the remnant, even if it is just a remnant of what it used to be. And that, God is faithful to his word, as we saw in the very first prayer of Nehemiah. He reflects back on that faithfulness of God and on how God is faithful to his word. And so, as our time is up here, that's just, we didn't get through everything with Nehemiah, but, there's one common theme here. In all of Nehemiah's prayers, not all of them, but there are a couple big prayers, and there are some really good ones to still come, which I kind of wish we had gotten to. If I wasn't talking about Nehemiah so much, we might have gotten to him. But the faithfulness of God is at the center of everything. And yeah, we see that here in the book of Nehemiah. And that's what the book of Nehemiah is all about. That's how they close those videos, so yeah. All right, well, thank you guys for being here for Bible study. If you have questions, let me know. Maybe I'll answer, maybe I won't. Keep you guessing.